On this channel, I've shown you several historical markers from around the USA in most episodes, but in this series I'm going to spotlight the organizations that bring these markers to the public, so everyone who visits that location can learn local history. In this Behind the Organization episode, I am focusing on the National Cemetery System, as well as the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, which helps sponsor markers for most of the cemeteries. Buried in these cemeteries are several of the men and women who have served the United States military. The human carnage of the American Civil War led Congress in 1862 to authorize President Lincoln to purchase cemetery grounds to be used as national cemeteries. By 1870, the remains of nearly 300,000 Union dead had been buried in 73 national cemeteries. As of early 2024, there are over 175 national cemeteries in the United States and its territories. The Department of Veterans Affairs National Cemetery Administration maintains most of them, while the United States Army and the United States Department of the Interior maintain several. It is estimated that 4 million veterans of all U.S. wars are interred in them. I will go ahead and show you a marker that tells about the history. I am at Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in South St. Louis, Missouri, and this is the administration building, but over there is a marker I'm about to read that explains the National Cemetery System. So you will find these markers at just about every national cemetery. Now, I've been to almost 15 national cemeteries, and 2 of them are quote-unquote newer. Like, I was not able to find this one at the Abraham Lincoln one in Elwood, Illinois, nor was I able to find one at the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies in Pennsylvania, which are like within the last 25 or 30 years old. But yes, you will find these that are sponsored by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and the National Cemetery Administration. So all these are the same text and same pictures, but I will go ahead and read off to what this says. So, Civil War dead. An estimated 700,000 Union and Confederate soldiers died in the Civil War between April 1861 and April 1865. As the death toll rose, the U.S. government struggled with the urgent but unplanned need to bury fallen Union troops. This propelled the creation of a national cemetery system. On September 11, 1861, the War Department directed commanding officers to keep accurate and permanent records of deceased soldiers. It also required the U.S. Army Quartermaster General, the office responsible for administering to the needs of troops in life and in death, to mark each grave with a headboard. A few months later, the department mandated interment of the dead and graves marked with numbered headboards recorded in a register. And then here's a picture of soldiers' graves near General Hospital, City Point, Virginia, from 1863. Over here, it's about creating national cemeteries. The authority to create military burial grounds came in an Omnibus Act of July 17, 1862. It directed the President to purchase land to be used as a national cemetery for the soldiers who shall die in the service of the country. 14 national cemeteries were established by 1862. When hostilities ended, a grim task began. In October 1865, Quartermaster General Montgomery C. Meigs directed officers to survey lands in the Civil War theater to find Union dead and plan to reinter them in new national cemeteries. Cemetery sites were chosen where troops were concentrated: camps, hospitals, battlefields, railroad hubs. By 1872, 74 national cemeteries and several soldiers' lots contained 305,492 remains. About 45% were unknown. Most cemeteries were less than 10 acres and layouts varied. In the Act to Establish and to Protect National Cemeteries of February 22, 1867, Congress funded new permanent walls or fences, grave markers, and lodges for cemetery superintendents. At first, only soldiers and sailors who died during the Civil War were buried in national cemeteries. In 1873, eligibility was expanded to all honorably discharged Union veterans, and Congress appropriated $1 million to mark the graves. Upright marble headstones honor individuals whose names were known. 6-inch square blocks mark unknowns. By 1873, military post cemeteries in the western frontier joined the National Cemetery System. The National Cemeteries Act of 1973 transferred 82 Army cemeteries, including 12 of the original 14, to what is now the National Cemetery Administration. And then down at the sidebar, reflection and memorialization. The country reflected upon the Civil War's human toll. 2% of the U.S. population died. Memorials honoring war service were built in national cemeteries. Most were donated by regimental units, state governments, and veterans organizations such as the Grand Army of the Republic. Decoration Day, later known as Memorial Day, was a popular patriotic spring event that started in 1868. Visitors placed flowers on graves and monuments, and gathered around rostrums to hear speeches. Construction of Civil War monuments peaked in the 1890s. By 1920, as the number of aging veterans was dwindling, more than 120 monuments had been placed in the national cemeteries. Now here are some pictures next to that column. So this is the Massachusetts Monument in Winchester, Virginia, which was put there in 1907. And this was the Maryland Sons Monument in Loudon Park in Baltimore, Maryland. And then in one of my upcoming videos, this is the Women's Relief Corps Grand Army of the Republic Monument to the Unknown Dead in Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis, Indiana. And then down here, it has the web address, www.va.gov, Veterans Affairs website. There is more detailed history about Confederate and pre-Civil War veterans that were added in later years. Some of it can be found at the cemeteries. In addition, in most cemeteries, you will find one about the actual cemetery with its history, as well as recommended areas within to check out. There is also one that talks about Confederate burials at that cemetery. That is usually found at some of them. All, of course, have the same brown and light tan format. Besides the markers, you will find plenty of memorials sponsored by national and/or local organizations. I have yet to visit a national cemetery administered by the National Park Service, as I'm sure they use a different format than the Department of Veterans Affairs. Some national cemeteries are larger than others, as far as size and the number of interments. The largest of all of them, at least in size, is the Riverside National Cemetery in Riverside, California. That one has 1,236 acres. And for those who are wondering, the smallest national cemetery is the Hampton Veterans Affairs Medical Center National Cemetery, located in Hampton, Virginia. But regardless of shape and size, most national cemeteries are a popular tourist attraction. In fact, the most visited cemetery in the United States is Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. Who can be buried at national cemeteries? Well, burial in any of the cemeteries is free to most veterans and their spouses as well as their dependent children. It is best to go to the Veterans Affairs website to find out if you are eligible. The President of the United States can also choose if they want to be buried in a national cemetery, since one of their duties is Commander-in-Chief. 4 of them are buried in these cemeteries. Yes, there are many famous or notable people buried at national cemeteries. Medal of Honor recipients, entertainers, singers, politicians, actors such as Howard McNear from The Andy Griffith Show, as well as Sherman Hemsley, best known for playing George Jefferson, are both interred at national cemeteries. It is not known when these markers were originally placed, as in the Department of Veterans Affairs sponsored ones. They have researched this history to the best of their ability, and you may also go on the VA website for more information. So that about wraps up this episode in the Behind the Organization series. How many national cemeteries have you visited? Maybe you have visited one, maybe you have visited a few, or a whole lot of them. Let me know in the comments.